Senator Klobuchar is introducing new federal legislation she hopes will...
We'll just sit back there and hear what I gotta say.
So Saturday last, I tried to fly on WestJet to get to Edmonton. I was denied boarding. When I went there, the agent said, "Is there a problem with your ID or something?" I looked on his computer, on his monitor, and it stated that Transport Canada knew who I was and that I was not to fly unless I had government-issued identification. Now, I asked whether or not I was on the specified persons list, and I was told I was not on the list, but that Transport Canada, some bureaucrat within it, had decided to interpret those regulations in such a manner that I was denied flight because, not because I'm a threat to safety or I'm potentially violent, but because merely I don't have government-issued identification. Now, if they had put me on the list, I would have certain remedy. I could go to court and say, listen, these people put me on the list and I want to know why. And if they had said, oh, well, he's on the list because he doesn't have government-issued identification, the court would laugh that right out of court. And I'll be showing you why on my little board. Now, so I'm not on the list, they don't claim I'm a threat to safety, yet I can't fly, and the remedy available to those who are denied boarding rights is only available to those who are denied because they're on the list. Now, at issue is the word issue. So we're going to need to examine what the word issue means legally and what the ramifications of having identification issued by the government means. Now, when you read the regulations, and we'll examine them, you will see that those people who have been issued identification by the government are in fact traveling under their permission. And under the regulations, they can revoke that permission for you to travel, and they tell the airline, sorry, the permission that this human being needs to travel is being revoked, and we're telling you don't let them travel. But if you don't have government-issued identification, you're not existing in a situation legally where they have the power to revoke permission because you don't exist or operate under and with it. I think it's really, really sad when people in Canada allow their servants to turn their rights into permissions, and they use a whole lot of deception to do it. Now, in the act, I got on the forum, on a AV Canada forum, and spoke to some WestJet employees, or chatted with some WestJet employees, and they all claim that according to the regulations, without identification issued by the government, you are not allowed to board. But that is simply not the case. When you read the regulations, you'll see that the airline's obligation is very simple. They are, let's go right here, they are to ask to see the government-issued ID. It does not say demand. If it said demand, it would create an obligation to have it. To ask is not to demand, and it does not create the same level of obligation. Nowhere in the Act does it say no ID equals no travel. Nowhere. The airline's only obligation is to ask to see it. Once it's provided, if there is no ID, it doesn't mean no travel. But if they do see ID, they compare that ID to the list. If it is on that list, then they have to call the Minister of Transportation, who can then revoke permission to travel. If not, they can fly. Because the assumption is the permission to travel has not been revoked. So that's what it is. But their entire assumption is that it says somewhere in there that if you do not have government issued identification, you must be denied the opportunity to travel. And it is not in there, and I'll tell you why. If a regulation has the intent or effect of effect of affecting existing rights, regulations, and I'll tell you why. If the intent or effect of any act or regulation is to affect existing rights, it must do so clearly, specifically, and unequivocally. Nowhere in the Passenger Protect Program regulations does it state that no identification means you can't travel. Nowhere. You have to use huge jumps of logic to do that, and if the Minister of Transport or Transport Canada tries to claim, well, you can't travel merely because you don't have identification, then what is the function of law that they are using to revoke your permission when we're all human beings, we're all equal, and I have never sought ID from them and put them in a position of being able to permit or not permit me to exercise my rights? See, it's not about passenger protection. This is about getting you to abandon a very large body of rights by being issued identification. Now let's look at the issue of issue. Servants do not issue to their masters, masters issue to their servants. If you are issued identification, a uniform, a gun, anything like this, the moment you accept that something is issued to you, you are now in a contract. You are either an employee or you are a ward, a child of the state, a child of your province. Issue flows and it defines who the master and the servant is. And the only way you can get the identification issued to you, you must submit an application. Submit legally means to abandon. An application legally means to beg. So you are abandoning a very large body of rights, and then you are begging them for identification, which not only identifies who you are as a human being, but that you can exist in a world where your ability to travel requires someone else's permission. There is no function of law whatsoever that allows the bureaucrats in Transport Canada to tell WestJet that permission for me to travel has been revoked if I don't have government-issued identification. And yet, that's exactly